Yashodanandana Prajajana Rajana Yamadiravanachari Yashodanandana Prajajana Rajana Yamadiravanachari Divine grace. Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada ki. Ram ki. Or Premanande. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki. That was awesome. Hare Krishna. Om Ajnana Tamarandasya Ginanjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurue Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostite Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Ishwari Vishibhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarabhischa Kripa Sindhubhye Vacha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mare Kabando Matsangin, Madguru Madmadana, Madnistaraka Madbhagya, Marananda Namostute. Asaru Saru Tadaya Nadini Chotata Karahana Muncha Karachimam Premna Ritkatayos Puraha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Creative Impetus, Chapter 1, The Activities of Maharaj Priyavrata, text number 25, and both in prose. So I'll just read them and then we'll skip the word for word on 25. We'll do the word for 26. And then we'll just go to the purport. We guessed. Agni Dren Madri Yagya Bahu Mahiva Hiryan Retu Grita Prista Savana Medatiti Vitihotra Kavaya Iti Sarva Egagni Namanaha. Translation: The 10 sons of Maharaj Priyavrata were named Agnidra, Idmajihwa, Yagyabahu, Mahavira, Hiranyareta, Gritaprista, Savana, Medatiti, Vitihotra, and Kavi. These are also names of Agni, the fire god. Welcome, sir. Welcome. Text number 26. No, we won't need to repeat. Eta Sham Kabir Mahavira Savana Iti Traya Asan Urdvareta Sastatma Vidyayam Arbabavad Arabhya Krita Parichaya Paramahamsyam Evashram Evashramam Abhajan. Word for word. Etasam of these. Kavihi, Kavi, Mahaviraha, Mahavira, Savana, Iti, thus, Trayaha, 3, Asan, were, Urdvaretashaha, completely celibate, Te, they, Atmavidyayam, in transcendental knowledge, Arbabhavat, from childhood, Arabhya, beginning, Parichayaha, were well versed, Paramahamsyam, of the highest spiritual perfection of human life. Eva, certainly. Ashramam, the order. Abhajan, executed. Translation. 3 among these 10, namely Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana, lived in complete celibacy. Thus trained in brahmachari life from the beginning of childhood, they were very conversant with the highest perfection, known as the Paramahamsa Ashram. Please repeat. 3 among these 10, namely Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana, lived in complete celibacy. Thus trained in brahmachari life from the beginning of childhood, they were very conversant with the highest perfection, known as the Paramahamsa Ashram. Purport. The word Urdhva Retasaha in this verse is very significant. Urdhva Retaha refers to one who can control sex life and who is, instead of wasting semen by discharging it, can use this most important substance accumulated in the body to enrich the brain. One who can completely control sex life is able to work wonderfully with his brain, especially in remembering. Thus, students who simply hear Vedic instruction once from their teacher could remember them verbatim without needing to read books, which therefore did not exist in former times. Another significant word is arbabhavat, which means from very childhood. Another meaning is from being very affectionate to children. In other words, Paramahamsa life is dedicated from the benefit of others. Just as a father sacrifices many things out of affection for his son, great saintly persons sacrifice all kinds of bodily comforts for the benefits of human society. In this connection, there is a verse concerning the 6 Goswamis. Tva turnamashesha mandalapati shrenim saratu chavat bhutva dina ganesha karunaya kopi nakatarshitau. Because of their compassion for the fallen souls, the 6 Goswamis gave up their exalted positions as ministers and took vows as mendicants. Thus, minimizing their bodily wants as far as possible, they each accepted only a loincloth and a begging bowl. Thus, they remained in Vrindavan to execute the orders of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by compiling and publishing various Vaishnava literatures. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachari Nirvishesha Shanivadi Pastashade Shatari. So, 2 shlokas here. One shloka is referring to the children of Maharaj Priyavrata, and the other is referring to the activities of those children. So, the most prominent of Maharaj Priyavrata's children we'll hear about in the next chapter was Agnidra, who is a very powerful king. And from him, his line later comes Lord Rishabdev. And one of the reasons we're hearing about Maharaj Priyavrata, of course, is because it should be understood that way, way back, many, many cantos ago, the question was asked by Vidura, please speak of the great activities of the devotee, Maharaj Manu, Swayambhuva Manu. So Swayambhuva Manu is one of the great devotees in the universe. The universe is described as 12 Mahajan devotees that are incredibly powerful spiritual beings who light up the way in acting in God consciousness. And so Swayambhuva Manu was one such being. And so the line of Swayambhuva Manu was described. It's described how Brahma, in the beginning of the universe, he creates these mental sons. And all the various mental sons. And the last of his mental sons was Narada Muni. But all of these sons, they were, some of them were inclined toward remaining brahmachari. The first was Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva was not interested in creation. So he was told to meditate until the time of destruction. And then the 4 Kumaras came out and they said, we're not interested in creation either. We're going to remain celibate our entire lives and use our mystic powers to remain children so that we can focus on God alone. And so he produced the various sages who are very powerful, but there was really no one for them to reproduce with. And so he was becoming frustrated, and finally, after producing Narada Muni, finally, out of his brain, 2 people came, Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa. And this is the first man and the first woman. And this is the first beings that reproduced sexually, which we hear, in terms of populating the universe, is far more effective than the creation of mental beings. We hear that later on. We'll hear about how that happens with Daksha. So then Swayambhuva Manu had 3 daughters and 2 sons. And the 3 daughters are Prashuti, Akuti, and Devahuti. And so we hear about all 3 of those. We hear about Akuti in the very beginning of the 4th canto. Then we hear about Prashuti. She's the wife of Daksha. And then we hear about, most famously, Devahuti, who is the wife of Kardama. And from her, 9 daughters and 1 son were produced. And that 1 son happened to be the Lord Kapiladev, who spoke the Sankhya philosophy. And so it's very wonderful activities. And then we switch gears in the 4th canto to hear about the sons of Maharaj Manu. And the first son that we hear about is King Uttanapad, who had 2 sons. One was the famous Dhruva. The other one was Uttama. And so Dhruva Maharaj became the king of the world. And his line is basically the entire 4th canto. You hear about Dhruva. You hear all about King Anga, King Vena, King Prithu, King Prachini Barashtat, all these great devotees, or these people who become, besides Vena, but they become great devotees. And then we hear about, finally, Prachini Barashtat's sons are called the Prachetas. And so the Prachetas, they were told by their father, before you have children, before you take the throne, I want you to go purify yourselves by doing meditation and austerity in the, what's the lake called? They go to this very beautiful lake. And so they go there. But while they're practicing meditation, Lord Shiva comes to them and then speaks the instructions of devotional service to them. And so they become disinterested in the process of trying to become king. They decide we're going to become sannyasis, we're going to become renounced, for the time being at least. And so they're more or less focusing on spiritual life. Then what happens is Maharaj Prachini Bari, he was very absorbed in material activities. He had no spiritual inclinations. He was not interested in any type of spiritual life. He was interested only in accumulating various pious credits so that he can have a better life in his next life and have an enjoyable life in this life. And so therefore he was doing lots of animal sacrifices, which are abominable. And then Narada Muni, the great Saint Narada Muni, appears and he says, you need to stop these animal sacrifices. They're abominable. They're causing so much, suffering to you. And so Narada Muni convinces him by telling a long story about Maharaj Paranjana. And he tells this long story in which he demonstrates the futility of trying to enjoy the material world, because the material world is full of suffering. And so after that, Prachini Bari, becoming enlightened by Narada Muni, just walks out in his kingdom, while the Prachetas are also performing austerity. So there's no king. So when there's no king, what happens is the trees grow, everything becomes overgrown, and the Prachetas wake up, and they're angry because now the whole world has kind of gone downhill. There's not been a king. There's not been a ruling class. So they decide to light up all the trees with their mystic powers, and they start chopping down big trees. And that's when the Devil's Tower, this, I don't know if that's a fact, but sometimes they say these are big trees. I always think that was the Prachetas chopping them down. But they were chopping down these trees, and so then the trees were thinking, I don't want to die. So Brahma came down and calmed the Prachetas, and then they offered the Prachetas a daughter, one of their daughters, to marry. And so the Prachetas became married, and they had one son. That son was the reincarnation of Daksha. And Daksha was willing to reproduce, but because Daksha wasn't going to become a king, he wanted to go also perform the Hamsaguya prayers, perform spiritual activities so that he could become ready to create the population. There was no king. So because of that, Swayambhuva Manu had to come down and act. And so therefore he went and got the brother of Uttanapad way back. Uttanapad's brother is Priyavrata. And so Dhruva's line and Priyavrata's line ended, and then Priyavrata came and was being spoken to here and told that he should become king, even though he was wanting to become a brahmachari his whole life. And therefore he stepped up onto the throne and he became king. We'll hear about Priyavrata's line a long time. And then Daksha comes back after the Chakshusha Manu, at the beginning of the Chakshusha Manu, Manvantara. Daksha comes back, and then Daksha reproduces all the living entities in the planet with his mind, and then with his daughters. He has 60 daughters, all of whom were given to Kashyapi Muni, and then Kashyapi Muni produced all the living entities. So that's us. We're all actually descendants of these great beings. So this is why this is talked about in Bhagavatam. Some people wonder, like when I was a kid in church, especially on Christmas, you always go to church on Christmas, and I'm Catholic church. And I was always in the choir, and it'd just be like just dreadfully boring, because they'd be like, so and so gave birth to so and so, who gave birth to so and so, who gave birth to so and so, and you couldn't understand a word they were saying. It was just like horribly boring. I mean, why is this in the Bible? Why this isn't necessary? And then you get to the Bhagavatam and you read, so and so gave birth to so and so, who gave birth to so and so, who gave birth to so and so, who was an incarnation of God, who gave birth to so and so, and then but when you really study the Bhagavatam, there's a reason for these, because you're hearing how the human society was shaped in the beginning of time, and there's a connection. And once you make those connections, it makes sense. Like, oh, we're hearing about these children of Priyavrata because they're connected all the way back to Dhruva, all the way back to the question asked at the end of the second canto about these great devotees, or the middle of the third canto. So then they switch gears here. And it talks about 3 among these sons, Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana, lived in complete celibacy. Thus trained in brahmachari life from the beginning of childhood, they were very conversant with the highest perfection known as the Paramahamsa ashram. So this verse is putting forth the potency of brahmachari life, and not Kali Yuga brahmachari like me, but a real brahmachari who is trained in brahmachari life from birth. And we have that in Bhakti Siddhanta. We can, see as a real deal brahmachari like this. But the concept here is that everything is energy. We understand that everything is energy. And I try to tell people this, and I really wish someone explained this to me as a child. It would have been so helpful. It would have been so helpful. But no one explains things like this. Everything is energy. And everything is an energetic equation in life. You can understand that if you give something, something comes back. If you use energy, that energy is gone. You have to regain it. And so semen for a male is the energy by which an entire being can be produced, a human child. It's so powerful, it can bring a soul into the world. So it's an extremely powerful substance. One of the words for semen is vira, meaning strength. Virya, it's full of strength, it's full of potency. And so the body produces various substances, but the last substance it produces is semen, because that's the most powerful substance. That's the culmination of all the other things the body creates. And so if that energy is wasted, then the body's going to focus on recreating that. So the other side of the equation is that if you don't waste that energy, it can't disappear. It doesn't disappear. It has to go somewhere. That energy basically transfers itself into the mind, into the heart, into the body, into health, into determination. And therefore, a brahmachari, you see, they become very determined. And they become very powerful. And I'm not saying I'm very powerful or anything, but what I am saying is that I've experienced in my life being a regular karmi and then being a brahmachari for 7 years, the difference in life of a brahmachari, how much focus you have, how much determination you have, how much your words have potency. And so many people in the mundane secular world speak about this, especially my generation. There's a movement for controlling oneself sexually. There's a movement among young men, mostly in the Christian church. But there's a big movement. And that movement focuses on, all the powers that one gets from, not in a sense like mystic powers, but just the powers and the potency one gets from controlling themselves. Because one's words have potency when one controls their senses. When a man controls his senses, he's more focused and people listen to him more. And anybody who has gone from a phase of not controlling their senses to a phase of controlling their senses for years understands that when one is a very weak man who doesn't control his senses, especially the sexual urge, he can't get any attention. He can't get anybody to listen to him. He can't. It's a fact. And he has no focus. Usually it's a symptom. And many philosophers have spoken about this. Greek philosophers, Christian philosophers, they've all spoken about this. That a man of uncontrolled sexual desire, his eyes can't focus, his health is bad. We have we have people that come here, boys that come here, and I can tell, they're deeply immersed in the lower southern regions of their body. And, we were affectionately calling one of them Smeagol. Smeagol's a character in The Lord of the Rings. This boy was very, very disturbed. But they become very wiry, very weak, very, they can't get anything going in life because they have no focus and they have no energy. And everything is energy. And so if someone explained this to you as a child, it's so helpful, but actually they explain the opposite. The whole materialistic propaganda is the opposite. People say, oh, actually you should have sex once a month. No, you should have sex once a day, every day, or else you're gonna become unhealthy. You're gonna get cancer. There's so many like propagandas they put out. There was one guy who was coming here for a while. He was saying, he had got prostate cancer, and he said, I blame my ex-wife for because I have prostate cancer. Said she wouldn't have sex with me 3 times a day. My new wife, she does. And I was just like, he's telling me this. I'm like, why are you telling me this? You're telling the wrong person this. Like, it's creepy, actually. So yeah, this is the way of materialistic people. They only care about eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. It's the only thing they care about. So therefore, one's mind is not able to dwell on those higher things. What to speak of if your mind is always engaged in eating, sleeping, and sex? You can't think about God. It's very difficult to think about God. It distracts you from God, and it traps you in your body. You can't see anybody as a spirit soul if you're always absorbed in sex life. Now, we're not condemning sex life, but what we're saying is that you cannot have a spiritual existence without controlling it, because, what to speak, you cannot see a woman as a spirit soul if you're absorbed in sex life. You always have to see them as an object. So then, therefore, you have to see other men as objects of competition. And this way, the materialists go on. And so this is a very kind of abominable way of existence. Prabhupada says, the hogs and the dogs. Hogs, dogs, camels, and asses. Therefore, the human life is tapo divyam putraka yena sattvam shudyad yasmin brahma sokyam tunantam. One should perform divine austerities in which one can attain the position of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore find happiness which is never ending and always increasing, spiritual happiness. So this most important substance, the semen, can be used to enrich the brain, enrich the body. And because of that determination, one develops health, one develops better health. And I think any man who's a brahmachari can experience that I don't ever get sick. I mean, I'll get like a little sick, but I'm never like crashed out sick anymore. And as time goes on, it's less and less. And what I've realized is it's also vibrational. There's one story about Prabhupada in Calcutta, and all the devotees got sick in Calcutta, except one. That devotee was Bhanu Das, who's now Bhanu Swami. And Prabhupada said, see, Bhanu Das is just continuing, just translating and working. He's continuing on. He said, Prabhupada said, this is brahmachari life. Bhanu Maharaj was just continuously working very nicely, whereas all the other devotees were becoming ill. So that's because when you hold a high vibration, sickness can't affect you as much. And that high vibration comes from doing good sadhana, being very determined to serve God, and being very focused on that which is going to elevate our consciousness versus that which is going to degrade our consciousness. So therefore, it's very, very potent. Whether one's married or whether one is a full-time brahmachari, one should practice self-control. And the bread and butter of spiritual life is, Vacho vegam, manasakroda vegam, jiva vegam, udaparasta vegam, etan vegam, yobashaheta dira, sarvam apimam prativim sashashyat. Rupa Goswami says that one should be able to control the 6 urges, the urges to speak, vacho vegam, manasakroda vegam, the urge of the mind, and the actions of anger, vacho vegam, manasakroda vegam, jiva vegam, the tongue, udaparasta vegam, and the belly and genitals. If one can control those 6 things, one is qualified to become a teacher. And this is why, our modern education, especially I look at medical industry, it really disturbs me. It's just so disturbing because, going to college, you hang out with a lot of people, and there's a lot of people who are medical students, and you're hanging with them. And then, some of these girls and boys are doing the most abominable things. Like these nursing girls and nursing boys, it's like they're doing abominable things, like really degrading things. Would never repeat them in a Bhagavatam class, and then you go to the doctor and then these people are serving you, they're trying to, they're helping you. And the thing is when you act in such a way of lower consciousness, you can't have real love. You cannot have real love. It's really difficult to have real love if you're going to be in that lower consciousness like that, because real love means I love you as a soul. I love you because you're part and parcel of Krishna. I care about you very deeply. But if your mind is dwelling on literal hell, like literally dwelling in hell, how could you love anybody? Because you're going to see people as their body. And so it's disturbing when you realize, especially, like a lot of the guys that become doctors, they're like abusing women for years in college. They join these fraternities, and these fraternities, the whole culture is like abuse women. It's the whole culture. And it's like part of being initiated into that culture. And so and this is, unfortunately, this is the way America is becoming, but we see I go to the college, 2-3 times a week. The students who are all doing great are the foreign students, because they're coming here for a purpose to learn. And generally all of them have some piety background. So therefore, it affects everything. And Jesus said, Jesus was asked, what's the worst sin? And Jesus said that the worst sin is sexual sin. He said the exact same thing Arjuna said. Maybe he read the Bhagavad Gita. He said that, there's so many things we can do that cause bad karma, but the thing about sexual sin is that it affects the whole society. If we just drink, it affects us. It's sinful to destroy your body. That's not good, because the body's a gift from God that you can use to have a higher consciousness. But when you engage in sexual sin, you're affecting another person, you're affecting children, and if children are born without, a father, then that's going to create what they call, Varnasankara. And that's bad population, and then the whole world is affected. And that's what we're seeing today. Everybody is Varnasankara. Practically nobody, now has their parents together. It's rare. So many people, parents aren't together, they don't know their father. And so a boy without a father is a very difficult life. A boy without a mother is a very difficult life. It's very difficult. You have to have both parents to really, and have a peaceful life. Sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, sometimes if one parent is really toxic, it's good to get away from that parent. But generally, it's good to have both parents, and that creates a more peaceful society where you can have a good population. So everything's affected. And then you have this, abortion. When you look at the number one cause of death for Generation Z is abortion, actually. Abortion has killed more people than the Nazis. Since abortion became legal in America, it's killed more people than the Nazis. It's killed more people than any war fought. It's killed more people than every war put together since that law came into effect. It's killed more people than in World War II, more people than Hiroshima. And so if you think that we're this body, then no big deal. But when you realize there is a soul present at the time of conception, because every living entity is running on the basis of a soul that is eternal, you understand that this is an activity which is going to create a reaction. Every action has an opposite or equal reaction, even on a subtle level. So this action of abortion has a serious effect on the world and the country and everything that we do, because there's a subtle reaction. So therefore, we have divine laws by which we can live. And these aren't, it's not like in the Christian world we hear about, it's just you go to hell if you don't follow God. But in the reality is that it's not about following God or not following God. It's that these activities have reactions which can be severe. There's a reaction to every activity, has an opposite or equal reaction. And if you don't act accordingly, then that reaction can be severely painful for the society. Therefore, everybody's encouraged to control themselves. Everybody's encouraged to learn the process of controlling their senses. How does one control their senses? By performing devotional service. This is the process. And so I think there's a culture now amongst young men that many men are understanding this and understanding that one has to become self-controlled to be manly. And it's a fact that people think that the man who is not self-controlled, or who is just like going with many women, he's like manly, but actually it's not the case. The self-controlled man becomes very powerful. And it's a well-known fact amongst non-devotees that if the man controls himself, his words become more powerful. People will listen to him more. Because there's a lot of subtle energies we can't see. that are affecting everything. So therefore, one should remain brahmachari or control themselves so that the brain can work wonderfully, especially in remembering. And I think that's true. I mean, my experience, that's true, because I remember the first time I tried to memorize a shloka, it took me like 2 weeks to memorize one shloka. Now I can memorize a shloka in 10 minutes, no problem. If I spend 10 minutes on a shloka, I can memorize it. And then it goes on that another significant word is arba bhavat, which means from very childhood. Another meaning is from being very affectionate to children. In other words, Paramahamsa life is dedicated for the benefit of others. Just as a father sacrifices many things out of affection for a son, great saintly persons sacrifice all kinds of bodily comforts for the benefit of human society. I can't help but think about Parameshvara, who was here for so many weeks, sacrificing so much comfort for the benefit of human society by distributing Prabhupada's books for so many years. But I say this many times that people say brahmachari life, this and that, and it's good for you, but actually, really brahmachari life means love. There's no other way about it. I think it's impossible to remain brahmachari if you just want to, I just don't want to, it's good for me. It's good for me. That's not really a good impetus. But when you realize that out of love, let me make sacrifices for my time and my energy to focus on serving and distributing Krishna consciousness to others, that becomes very powerful impetus to do anything. That when I was a child, I realized pretty young that love is the most powerful thing in the universe. I'm fully convinced of that by 12 years old, that love is the answer to all problems. And I was listening to a lot of hippie music like my whole life. So, John Lennon told me all you need is love, because he was my Guru Maharaj at that time. I took it as, that's the truth. All you need is love. And, what is love? I didn't know really what love was, but in time, I began to understand, what love was. And I thought, well, let me serve people. Let me help people. Helping people is love. So I decided to go to school for environmental engineering or environmental science, where I think I'll help the environment. Then the people that are involved in the environmental world of activism are abominable. They are like the most disgusting people I've ever come across in my life. I can't even tell you. And I was just thinking, my God, these people are miserable. I was doing some animal rights activism and some different things like that, trying to, stop, in Sedona. And I did help significantly with this. There was one property that was going to be bulldozed and turned into a hotel. It was a beautiful Red Rock property. And so, I went to the, county meeting and gave a speech. And somehow or another, I've always had a knack for public speaking. So it was like a really heavy speech, and it hit hard. But then I was, thinking like, these people are just, their lives are horrible. I remember they were like, they're like in politics and they're doing all these big things, but at night they had horses and they were hiding it all. They were like working, they're my bosses, but they were hiding it from me. And so they would like go feed their horses. We started to notice, they act weird at night, they're acting different. And then we noticed one night we went to the store late at night and we saw our boss. We're like, "Hey, brother, how's it going?" And he looked in his basket and he just had 2 things. He's just like, just getting the essentials, And there's a big giant bottle of sake, which is Japanese liquor, and carrots to feed the horses. He was just getting the essentials, carrots and sake. And I was like, well, they were like severe alcoholics. And here they are doing all these so-called good things, but they're severe alcoholics. And then, why? Because they have no God. They had no God in their life. They were convinced they were God. They were big followers of Sai Baba. And they were convinced that they were God. I remember I said, Krishna, I tried talking about Krishna. I said, oh, Krishna's just a yogi. But we're all God. Remember, I told him, I was not like a practicing devotee, but I told him, I said, how could we all be God, man? Like, you're like suffering like anything. How could you say you're God? The arrogance was so much. So I began to realize these people are not they're not good people. They're suffering like anything. And so then I came to the conclusion that the only way to help people is to somehow or another serve God. And, let me assist the Krishna consciousness movement. That became my conclusion. And so then I made some decision to, assist the Krishna conscious movement. And then somehow I ended up here at the temple, which Krishna fulfilled that desire. But the real process of loving is to give someone Krishna. Prabhupada said that once he was giving a talk, and he said, he pointed at his sannyasi disciples. He said, this is real mercy. This is real love. That this sannyas is real love because they are giving up so much for the benefit of all others. And I think that's an intrinsic message in the Bible also. The Bible is basically centered on this point that Lord Jesus Christ is making a sacrifice for all souls going through so much suffering. And it's kind of one of those points where, if you think deeply about it, they didn't just kill Jesus because they didn't like him, because he was ugly or something. They killed Jesus because he was preaching the absolute truth, and he was going against the religious order of the time. He was going against society by preaching the absolute truth. And therefore, they killed him. So he made the ultimate sacrifice for the benefit of the entire society. And society's benefited greatly from that. Human society's benefited greatly from that sacrifice that was made. So therefore, the more we do austerity, not just austerity for ourselves, but when we do austerity for the process of spreading Krishna consciousness, that really pleases Krishna. And that really gives us the ability to have mercy and love for all living entities. So it starts at home. What can you do? What can you give up for the service of Krishna? For your own spiritual benefit, so then you can go and you can give spiritual benefit to others. When you decide that I'm going to give up illicit sex, meeting, intoxication, gambling, and you decide that I'm going to, remain this way so I can preach, then Krishna will be pleased with that. Not just let me remain celibate, just because I want to remain celibate. And there's an example in the Chaitanya Bhagavat about the brahmachari drinking milk. He's very austere. He was drinking milk only. And he snuck into the kirtan. Lord Chaitanya became angry and said, there's someone in here. Get him out of here. I don't want to see his face. More later, Lord Chaitanya told him, he says, you think you can please me just by drinking milk? It doesn't please Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya is pleased by he who is chanting Hare Krishna and spreading chanting Hare Krishna. This is the real way to please the Lord. So wherever we're at, we can just take some desire to help assist Srila Prabhupada in spreading Krishna consciousness. And in this way, we can show real love to human society. Otherwise, it doesn't give us so much benefit. The real thing is in spreading it. And Beatles, the last thing the Beatles ever said was, the love you take is equal to the love you make. And so, we're going to get so much as what we give. So therefore, no one describes this brahmachari life as a child. I remember, because as growing up, in Catholic, the priests are all celibate. I remember thinking, like, God, they're so mean to those poor priests. The church is so mean to those poor priests. Like, such a horrible thing to do. I think that was like a general consensus amongst many of us, like, these guys really suffering, So the poor Catholic Church is just so horrible that all the people who want to serve it, they have to become celibate. And there was really no concept. I never heard one time a why. Of course, it's there. And then you talk to any real monks there in the church, they'll know this fact, that they're giving up this energy which should be going to raising a child, raising a family, working, to be fully dedicated to God. And they get this potency. And I mean, if you're around real, I mean, I always remember the first time I saw a sannyasi, I remember thinking that the energy I felt reminded me of like certain Catholic priests I grew up with, very high energy, a lot of love, because they're dedicated fully to that activity of spreading God consciousness. So no one describes this, that energy will be transformed into ojas. And that ojas is going to empower the body, empower the mind, empower the health, and allow one to become very determined in their service. Prabhupada gives the example that, we can do so much with our physical bodies, but, how many years that they tried to remove England from India, but Gandhi, simply by taking a vow of celibacy, he was able to single-handedly kick out the English from India. So man becomes very, very powerful in that regard. Just to address the point, because I know it gets asked a lot, what about women? Women have a different type of energetic system than men do in this regard. Because the way that a man's energy works is that a man has, because this is sexual energy, is the creative energy. It's the creative energy of existence. And so the way it works is that it basically goes up, 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 goes up indefinitely. So man can become very, very powerful by practicing celibacy, but then when it's lost, it goes down to bottom. Whereas a woman's energy goes up, goes up, goes up, goes up, goes up, and then at the end of the month, crashes down. Goes up, goes up, goes up, goes up, comes down. And so one of the things we see today is that this imbalance in the genders, which we experience, Jayadvaita Swami said, the men are all becoming wimps. And I can't agree more. Non-devotee men especially, non-religious men, they're wimpy. And you observe it, like 17-year-olds now, I don't want to say anything, 17-year-olds in 1911 were literally in trenches fighting Germans, or, in 1945 were running up Omaha Beach, so it's a different world. One of the reasons is because there's a propagation by demoniac persons propagating pornography and propagating illicit sex. And that propagation makes men weak. And these weak men are so weakened that they're not good husbands. They're not good protectors. And so women don't have any protection from these weak men. And therefore the women are thinking, okay, I got to do it myself. And the women have more energy than the men do. And it's a fact. It is a fact. The women have more energy than the men do when men are weakened by this propaganda. The women have more energy because their energy doesn't go down with sex life. Their energy just remains, and they have enough energy throughout life. It goes down at the end of the month, that creative energy. But they have enough energy through life to just maintain, like I can keep a job, I can do this, I can go to college, I can live. I have to protect myself. But a real man who's practicing Krishna consciousness and controlling himself, that person becomes able to protect. He becomes able to think clearly. He becomes able to lead. And when there's enough of that culture going around, then women can actually be in their proper role of being mothers, trusting men, taking protection from them, and then raising children nicely. So this is a whole imbalance in human society. And therefore, the only solution is devotional service. The only solution is that both men and women are trained in devotional service. And it's a fact too. Prabhupada makes these statements which are so, taboo. He says women are less intelligent than men, these types of really crazy statements, seemingly crazy, But one of the points is that women, they can do all the things men can do in terms of, writing, reading, English, math, all of this stuff. But one thing is a fact about women is they're more easily influenced by the culture around them. It's their nature. They're easily influenced by the culture around them. And so, therefore, women are always protected. It's not just protecting their bodies. Okay, that's one thing. Protecting the minds of children and women is very important. And that's why there's a focus on rigidity. Sometimes men have to become rigid in terms of ideas, because the wrong idea is much more dangerous than just damaging the body. And so if that wrong idea comes in, oh, actually, you know what? You don't need to control your senses, sexual freedom. When that becomes an idea, that becomes something that's considered empowering, or it's all right to murder your child in the womb. That's an empowering thing. It's your body, not your body. It's Krishna's body. It's not that's someone else's body in your womb. It's not your body, and therefore it's not your right. It's Krishna's body, and it's Krishna's right. And Krishna is the one who gives and takes life, not you. And so when this idea comes prominent, then the whole thing becomes corrupted. So therefore, society ideally is done in such a way that there are Brahmins and there are Kshatriyas protecting the ideas, the culture of society. Lord Ram killed a Sudra for reading the Vedas. Lord Ram killed a Sudra for reading the Vedas because it was considered that dangerous that this knowledge is going to be misused and propagated in the wrong way. So therefore, we have to perform devotional service, and we have to encourage others in devotional service, and we have to create a society which is devotional. Prabhupada says in the introduction to Bhagavatam that this is a cultural presentation for all of those who say that, oh, we don't need the culture of Krishna consciousness, we just need the science. Well, you can say that, but what Prabhupada said is that this is a cultural presentation. So we're presenting a counterculture to the culture of modern society, counterculture in which we play our karmic role. If we're born brahmanas, we act in such a way, not born by birthright, but by guna and karma. We act a certain way by which we can serve society and help people come to the stage of devotional service. So therefore, everybody, whether they are married, not married, children, adults, everybody is called to practice brahmacharya, meaning that one is living a controlled life of sense control. And in that sense control, practicing devotional service. If you're just controlling your senses, no big deal. That's nothing. But if you're practicing pure Krishna consciousness and using everything for Krishna, that's real renunciation. Therefore, we should practice everything in terms of serving Krishna. When you offer that desire to Krishna, that I have this desire, I don't want to be, I have a desire, I want to go get married, or I want to do this or that, but I'm not, because I'm making that austerity. Bhoktaram yagya tapasam, that the austerity is offered to Krishna. It's not just because I want this or I want that, or I want to become, I want to have a good brain and a good memory. Bhoktaram yagya tapasam, it's offered to Krishna so that it can be used in devotional service. Then that becomes a pleasing offering. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, realizations? Lita, Priya?
So, something that I've observed my entire life is that spiritual practices, churches and whatnot that require celibacy are often plagued with sexual scandals. And
True.
And so
also, all the ones that don't require celibacy are plagued with sexual scandals too. So. Don't kid yourself. They're all everywhere. That's Kali Yuga is there. Sexual scandal is there.
And so I guess my question is, is it better to attempt the celibacy and then potentially cause a situation where children are being molested? Or to allow marriage?
That's not the cause. Celibacy is not the cause, because children are getting molested, and I don't want to name the churches, but there's so many. Catholic churches, I'm laying that one because everybody knows that that's had its problems. But majority of the time, it's not celibate people molesting children, and in the vast majority of the world, or people who are so-called celibate people. The one other church is famous for severely causing. There's no one celibate in that church. Everybody's, supposed to get married. The real thing is this is kind of a psychological answer rather than a scriptural answer in a sense, but, we have to be acquainted with our darkness. We have to, we can't repress. Repression causes problems. One has to be able to actually perform the process of spiritual life in a way that they are overcoming these things. And it should be noted that anytime that psychopathic people and predatory people are attracted to religious organizations, the number one job for psychopaths, and psychopath means someone who is born without compassion, that empathy doesn't come in their body, so they can basically just do anything for their own benefit. The number one profession for psychopathic people is ministry. So people who are psychopathic are attracted to ministry, and people who are predators are attracted to roles as priests and teachers where they can abuse children. That's a reality. They're attracted to that because of their own predatory nature. And when you don't have that nature, it's hard to understand why would you want to do that, but that's the way that a predator thinks. So those are things to consider. Another thing to consider is that, forced celibacy is not necessarily good. Like the Catholic Church does have this element of forced celibacy for those who want to serve God, where, in our movement, anybody can serve God. Whether one is, you can give class, you can go on the altar, you can be a guru even. You can do all those things in whatever ashram. And there's stages of life. That's one of the points of stages of life. In the beginning stage, you're controlling your senses. In the middle stage, when things get more intense, you become a grihasta, then you become a vanaprastha, you go back to controlling your senses, and then become, renounced. And at the stage of vanaprastha, one can, if they're vacho vegam, manasakroto vegam, jiva vegam, mudaprastha vegam, they can become a teacher of spiritual life. So honesty is important, but on a psychological side of things, there's this element of, the darkness that we repress. We kind of repress the darkness, or, we want to put such a persona on that. Look at me, I'm this brahmachari, I'm free from material desires or something like that. Whereas, the reality is that, there's tons of material desires. And if we kind of find ourselves living in the persona rather than being real with ourselves, then the persona attacks us back. And therefore, in the darkness, we're doing all kinds of weird stuff. And that's a fact. So we have to also be aware, and people need the understanding that, when you become a renunciate, and I think Urmila Devi put it really nicely, that, and I deal with devotees saying, you're a brahmachari, it means you're a pure devotee, or you're pure, you don't have any desires. Well, actually, no, the brahmacharis, they have all the same desires as the married people. They're just dealing with it a different way. That's really the case. Maybe there are some who are pure devotees, who are paramahamsas, but the vast majority of those practicing celibacy are just dealing with that in a different way. They're channeling that energy in a different way, and they're dealing with it in a different process in marriage. But in any case, we're all full of light and dark in these bodies. These bodies and minds are full of light and darkness because they're born of the dualistic material world. The soul is transcendental to those things. Therefore, we should perform devotional service and become transcendental to the pullings of the modes of material nature. So the real solution is, don't become celibate because I want to become celibate. Become a pure devotee. Bhaktivinoda Thakur had 14 children, yet was a pure devotee, because this understanding, mam cha yovya bicharena bhakti yogena sevate saganan samatit yatan brahmabhuyaya kalpate, constant engagement in devotional service under all circumstances, you transcend the modes. That's the solution. Kirtan Yogi is doing the prasadam dance. ready for prasad. Bhagavatam ki jai.
Thank you so much for beautiful.
I don't think they're guests like you.
It's really like
Yeah,
the society needs more of this.